Meeting in Geneva for a third round of indirect nuclear talks. The U.S. says it hopes the negotiations will produce an agreement to prevent Tehran from acquiring nuclear weapons. The first phase of Thursday's meeting, mediated by Oman, lasted 3 hours. In a statement on X, the Omani Foreign Ministry says the Iranian and U.S. delegations have demonstrated unprecedented openness to new and creative ideas and solutions. The biggest U.S. military buildup in the region since the 2003 invasion of Iraq has raised fears of a wider conflict. All eyes are now on whether both sides can bridge their differences before the window of diplomacy closes. Our reporters Julia Hamilton in Geneva and Ehsan Kiavani in Tehran have more details.
Well, this round of talks has a more urgent feel to it. They are seen as an attempt to prevent a conflict. U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to strike Iran if a nuclear deal is not reached. And the U.S. has deployed a large fleet in the Middle East, and this includes fighter jets, destroyers and cruisers. And this is seen as an attempt to pressure Iran to concessions. At the same time, Donald Trump said that he would prefer to find a diplomatic solution. So Iran has also signaled that it's prepared to offer some concessions about its nuclear program. And the last time, Iranian foreign minister, following the last round of talks, said that an underlying understanding on the main guiding principles was reached between the two sides during those talks. Now, Tehran denies building a nuclear weapon and insists that its program is for peaceful purposes. So it remains to be seen if any breakthrough comes out of the latest round of talks here in Geneva. Geneva.
From what the is referred to a religious decree by the country's supreme leader, which prohibits the use of nuclear weapons. Besides, as I said, the missile program is Iran's red line. Therefore, it seems that Iran's positions in both cases are firm.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said an equitable deal can be reached with the United States.
Answer questions. We are ready to remove concerns, but we are not ready to give up our right for peaceful use of nuclear technology. This is what we demand. We are a committed member of NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, and we have accepted not to have nuclear weapons, but at the same time we have full rights to use nuclear technology for peaceful purposes, and we want to practice that right. If there is any question, as I said, if there is any concern, we are ready to address. So we can build confidence on our nuclear program. And in return, we expect sanctions being terminated.
A man has appeared in court in Kenya accused of being involved in an alleged scheme that deceived Kenyans with promises of skilled work in Russia, only for them to end up in the front lines in Ukraine. Festus Onwamba was earlier arrested in Moyale, near the Ethiopian border, and faces charges of trafficking 25 Kenyans to Russia last year. A police spokesperson said Onwamba sought to flee Kenya after returning from Russia. Kenya's government has revealed that over 1,000 Kenyans were recruited to fight for Russia in Ukraine. At least 89 are still on the front lines, with many others injured or missing. Intelligence reports suggest collusion between Kenyan and Russian officials and rogue recruitment agencies. While the Russian embassy in Nairobi denied the claims, Kenya's Foreign Minister Musalia Mudavadi announced diplomatic efforts to address the situation, including securing the release of Kenyans imprisoned in Ukraine. Analysts say Onwamba's arrest marks a significant step in the government's fight against this illegal recruitment.
The rogue agencies are targeting ex-military, ex-police officers, as well as civilians aged between the mid-20s to 50 years, who are desperate for job opportunities abroad. The agencies have been enticing Kenyans, promising them lucrative terms of service, such as salaries of about 350,000 shillings per month and hefty bonuses between 900,000 shillings and 1.2 million Kenya shillings, as well as eventually being issued with Russian citizenship. As of February 2026, the following is the status of some of the Kenyans who went to Russia. 39 are hospitalized, 30 have been repatriated, 28 are missing in action, 35 deployed in camps or bases, 89 are on the front line, 1 is detained, and 1 has completed the contract.
You know, we love big things. Oh, syndicate, oh, trafficking. But the question is, how do we give the other parties opportunity to be able also to their story to be heard? That's the question. You cannot condemn anyone unheard. It is wrong.
Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha recently addressed growing concerns over African nationals being caught in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Speaking alongside Ghana's Foreign Minister Samuel Okudzeto Oblakwa,
presidency of the AU next year is expected to bring heightened awareness and action to combat the recruitment efforts.
We have been very proactive in carrying out public education, sensitizing the public in Ghana that they should not fall for these modus operandi of the criminal trafficking network.
Russia has denied accusations of illegal recruitment. In a statement released on Thursday, the embassy of the Russian Federation in Kenya described reports in the local media on recruitment of local nationals as dangerous and misleading. Also, in a recent interview with CGTN, Russian ambassador to Nigeria denied any state-backed enlistment of Nigerians.
There is no government-supported program to recruit Nigerians to fight in Ukraine. And if there are some agencies, including Russian agencies, which are acting violating Russian law, we are ready to transmit this information to Russian law enforcement authorities.
The growing number of African fighters has raised tensions between Moscow and several African countries, including Ghana.
According to our data, there are currently over 1,780 citizens from the African continent fighting in the Russian army. We are speaking about mercenaries here. A lot of them have already died. Quite a few were taken prisoner.
As the situation continues to unfold, these incidents are raising serious questions about the exploitation of African citizens in global conflicts. Sharon Baranga, CGTN.
Meanwhile, in South Africa, a group of men who say they were lured into fighting for Russia have recently returned home. The men said they had been deceived with promises of lucrative security jobs, only to find themselves deployed on the front lines in Ukraine's Donbas region. The South African government intervened diplomatically, with President Cyril Ramaphosa raising the issue with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. Local activists also helped in facilitating their return. The men arrived at King Shaka International Airport in Durban on Wednesday, where they were received by police and family members. 5 people face charges related to their recruitment and are due to appear in court in April.
The MK was used by those people who sold our men. As a founder of MKP, I assisted them to come back because I wanted the name of the MKP to be clear. that we were not involved on this. It was just those thugs who wanted to make quick money out of our men.
The UN's International Organization for Migration says almost 8,000 people died or went missing last year on perilous migration routes, such as across the Mediterranean to Europe or from the Horn of Africa towards the Arabian Peninsula. However, it warned that the real toll is likely to be far higher. The migration agency said although the number of deaths fell to roughly 7,600 last year from nearly 9,200 in 2024, the decline reflects shrinking access to information and funding shortfalls that have hampered tracking. Sea routes remain among the most dangerous, with at least 2,100 people reported dead or missing in the Mediterranean last year and just over 1,000 on the Atlantic route. The trend has continued into this year, with migrant deaths in the Mediterranean climbing above 600 last week. The agency says legal pathways for migration are shrinking, pushing more people into dangerous pathways and into the hands of smugglers and traffickers. And now to Nigeria, where its problems with insecurity continue. At least 30 people were killed and several houses torched after gunmen attacked 2 villages in the northeastern state of Adamawa on Tuesday night. The villages are on the edge of the Sambisa forest, where Boko Haram and the Islamic State West Africa province operate. A local leader from one of the villages said the assailants arrived dressed in military uniforms that initially led residents to mistake them for soldiers on patrol. 18 bodies were recovered after the gunmen swept through the community. In the second village, the armed men arrived on over 50 motorcycles, burnt a local school, and attacked a nearby military base. A resident said they killed 14 people, including 3 soldiers. The state governor condemned the attacks as cowardly acts of terrorism. A senior UN official has called for a major international intervention in South Sudan as fighting between the army and the main opposition group continues in the country's northeast. Hundreds of thousands of people have been forced from their homes in Jonglei State, with reports of killings, hospital bombings, and severe shortages of food and medicine. Tom Fletcher says the situation needs a coordinated effort from both the UN Security Council and regional organizations such as the African Union. CGTN's Joy Kuruki Juma has more.
In a hospital in Akobo, a town in South Sudan's volatile northeast and on the border with Ethiopia, 18-month-old Kol Gatien Pajok lies quietly as a physiotherapist wraps bandages around his injured leg. His grandmother, Nyayuol Chuol, says government forces shot the toddler and killed his parents during an attack on their village. She said she carried him 130 kilometers to reach medical care. They are among some 280,000 people displaced in recent weeks by renewed fighting in Jonglei State between the army, led by President Salva Kiir, and a rebel group known as the Sudan People's Liberation Movement in opposition, led by Riek Machar. Tensions and bitterness between the pair aren't unusual. They fought a bitter civil war after the country's independence in 2011 until a peace deal in 2018 allowed them to form a unity government. However, that has since broken down, with Machar placed under house arrest and facing charges of treason. It sparked a return to the fighting, with ordinary people once again bearing the brunt.
For me, the peace agreement is over because the government soldiers came to attack us. If there was still an agreement, they should not have come and killed us.
In Akobo, in Jonglei State, more than 42,000 displaced people are sheltering under the protection of the United Nations mission in South Sudan. Humanitarian facilities have also been hit. A hospital run by Doctors Without Borders was bombed in early February. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says at least 13 health facilities in Jonglei have been looted or partially destroyed. Aid workers describe severe shortages.
There's no feeding, there's no drugs, there's high needs of medications and feeding, and also some shelter too. They need shelter. Like, for how long will they be in the charge and the school?
During a visit to Akobo, UN humanitarian chief Tom Fletcher urged stronger international engagement both in terms of humanitarian assistance and in ending a conflict which most people have no real stake in.
And we need that political engagement from the Security Council, from the great powers, from the regional powers to say enough. Because this is a conflict over resources that people here will never see. And so we need those guns to fall silent.
For families gathered to greet him, the message was clear. They need assistance as soon as possible. Yet they agree the assistance must also come with tangible efforts to renew South Sudan's fragile peace deal. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Analysts say the release of political detainees in South Sudan, including Vice President Riek Machar, could pave way for dialogue. As CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports, it appears to be the primary issue hampering a Kenyan-led peace initiative.
The South Sudan Opposition Movement Alliance is insisting that suspended Vice President Riek Machar and other political detainees be released before talks can begin. But South Sudan's government disagrees.
Dr. Riek is under competent court, and that competent court is the one trying, and the decision will come with that court. It cannot, at this point, be politicized or any politician to talk about it.
Kenyan mediation seeks to revive stalled peace efforts and produce a national consensus charter aimed at stabilizing South Sudan and paving the way for elections scheduled for December. The UN says it backs the dialogue.
We are strong supporters of a genuinely inclusive national dialogue. It's vital to bring all the key voices around the table to bring South Sudan back to a story of hope and opportunity and potential.
The UN also says it is concerned about the humanitarian situation in the country, stating that 7 out of 10 people need humanitarian support this year. There are ongoing skirmishes between government troops and forces loyal to Machar. The fighting is mostly in the east and north of the country.
Many here fear ongoing conflicts in Sudan, the Middle East and Ukraine are drawing the international community's attention away from South Sudan's ongoing violence. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Time now for a short break. We shall reset and return with more Africa Live. Here's what's ahead. Coming up, we see why scientists are going back in time to protect the future of tea.
How will China's 15th five-year plan affect the lives of 1.4 billion people? And what does China's policy making mean for the world? People's democracy in action. This March, China's most important annual political event, the Two Sessions. We'll bring you comprehensive coverage of crucial decisions on high-standard opening up, new quality productive forces, China's green transition and enhancing people's well-being, and its impacts in a time of global turmoil and uncertainty. Join us for our special coverage of the Two Sessions, only on CGTN.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. India's Prime Minister has ended his two-day visit to Israel. Narendra Modi delivered a speech at the Knesset on Wednesday, reaffirming his country's relationship with Tel Aviv. He also said that India supports ongoing peace and reconstruction efforts in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu welcomed Modi and highlighted the country's bilateral cooperation. Modi became India's first prime minister to travel to Israel since 2017. An Israel airstrike has killed 2 Palestinians in northern Gaza, and that's according to health officials in the territory. Medics said the strike hit a group of Palestinians in Gaza City's Tufa neighborhood on Thursday, wounding several others. The Israeli military did not immediately comment on the report. Separately, Israel's military said its forces operating in southern Gaza killed a militant who posed what they called an imminent threat after crossing into an area they still occupied inside the enclave. It called the incident a violation of a U.S. brokered ceasefire between Israel and Hamas that began in October. The fighting in the eastern DRC has been ongoing since late 2021, but it took a significant turn early last year when the M23 seized large swaths of territory. As the violence escalated, millions of people were forced to flee for their lives, seeking refuge in already overcrowded displacement camps. Months later, many say it's getting increasingly difficult to attend to even their most basic needs. CGTN's Caroline B. with more.
The persistent conflict in the eastern DRC has left millions of people homeless, with many fleeing to the many displacement camps scattered around the region. Kamanyola in South Kivu and Burembo in North Kivu are among the largest. Many departed their communities in a panic, with little or no possessions. Challenges and dangers were lacking everywhere.
We fled without taking anything. We have no pots, no plates, no containers. Even clothes, we didn't bring them. The difficulties we face are things like hunger. I sleep on the floor with my 9 children, and this small mattress was given to me by a neighbor. The children don't even fit on this mattress.
We stay far from the river. The water is not clean and can cause health problems. There is the danger of being attacked along the way by bandits who might rape you. We are always afraid to send children here because they could be bitten by snakes or other animals, or even kidnapped.
Life here is very difficult, with many doing whatever they can to provide for their families. But opportunities are scarce, and aid is minimal.
We are really suffering since arriving here at Burembo. I helped someone cultivate land and was paid with this small amount of maize. Now I'm trying to turn it into flour to make porridge to feed the children.
The International Committee of the Red Cross, or the ICRC, has a strong presence here, but even their operations are limited by the amount of funding they receive, which has recently slowed to a trickle.
We have seen a rather drastic decrease in humanitarian aid over the past few years, and the ICRC is not spared from this budget reduction. What does this mean to Eastern DRC? It means more needs for less humanitarian funding. We at the ICRC find ourselves operating in areas where there are fewer humanitarian actors and more needs. So this obviously creates expectations from the populations that we cannot always meet.
Despite numerous calls for a ceasefire, the conflict continues, and these camps struggle more and more to provide for their residents. Caroline B., CGTN.
Meanwhile, the government in Kinshasa is also having to deal with a major Islamic insurgency in the volatile eastern region. Despite military interventions, a group called the Allied Democratic Forces, or ADF, continues to terrorize communities in North Kivu and Ituri provinces. Looking for a way forward, stakeholders met in the North Kivu city of Beni. As Wilka Nyabo reports, the emphasis was on trying to stop the group's financing and recruitment programs. Let's take a listen.
The Allied Democratic Forces, or ADF, is a Ugandan Islamist rebel group based in western Uganda and Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. While several joint military initiatives by the country have limited the group's impact over the years, it's nevertheless been able to regenerate through strong financial networks and a recruitment drive that's being sustained by a lack of other opportunities. The group wants to establish an Islamic state in the region, encompassing much of North Kivu and Ituri provinces, and has been terrorizing local communities for years now to meet that end. Virtually nobody feels safe.
I was kidnapped in Mabelenga on market day. They took me into the bush to their camp called Maitatu, where 6 men raped me. It was when the army attacked that I managed to escape because everyone had to save themselves.
Desperate for an end to the terror, prominent officials and other figures met for a special forum in the city of Beni in North Kivu. Local residents urged them to find a solution.
May this forum be positive and beneficial. May they sit down this time to find ways to put an end to this problem once and for all. The ADF are causing us a lot of harm. They're driving people out of our communities. Eringeti, Kantine and Mutwanga are not habitable anymore. We wonder how and where we will live in peace.
The Armed Forces of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the FARDC, says it's a complex operation.
When fighting them, we sometimes have to play a triple role. We are deep in combat against the aggressors, and at the same time, we are fighting against the ADF. And sometimes we are called upon to do the work of the police. This requires manpower. It requires a large, well-trained army.
However, there are signs that the ADF may be losing its appeal, and this is largely due to special incentives being provided by the authorities and other groups.
Today, there are around 200 combatants and more than 800 people who are kidnapped and dependent on these combatants who have reintegrated into their communities. Today we see that there are also a good number of people who want to leave the bush, thanks to the messages we are spreading about defecting from this movement.
The forum agreed that this might be a way forward by trying to provide incentives for young people to stay away from the group and also to provide a safe pathway for existing members to rejoin society. It's an uphill struggle, but the forum seemed to indicate a major will to finally put an end to the ADF insurgency. Wilkis Anabwa, CGTN.
Rubaya, the town where the M23 spokesperson was killed, was in the news earlier this year when more than 200 people were killed in a collapse at a coltan mine. It was the latest deadly incident to hit the mineral-rich eastern region of the DRC, where small-scale or artisanal mining is widespread. However, as CGTN's Chris Ochemringa reports from Kinshasa, authorities say they are now looking to improve governance in the area.
The eastern DRC is a mineral-rich region, but one that is poorly governed. The country has large deposits of gold, cobalt and coltan used in electronics and renewable technologies. But widespread corruption and conflict has left millions of small-scale miners struggling to get by, while major mining firms make huge profits. Large-scale industrial extraction has also raised environmental concerns.
Many residents here have been complaining about air pollution. Some of those mining factories emit harmful gases that make it difficult for us to sleep at night.
The DRC's mining sector has attracted huge numbers of casual laborers who work without any protective gear in a dangerous industry. In February, more than 200 people died in the east after heavy rains caused the Rubaya mines to collapse. The government is now seeking to promote safe and sustainable mining. Authorities recently signed the Institutional Framework Agreement, which is supposed to guarantee the transparency, safety and traceability of mineral flows.
We got to restore some order in artisanal mining because it's becoming quite an issue. But at the same time, we need to make sure that exploration is moving ahead.
However, regions captured by M23 rebels have their own rules. Analysts say the rise in global demand for the DRC's critical minerals has partly contributed to illegal mining and the breakdown of law and order in the country's east.
The laws are in Congo and the regulation is there in place. Is the regulation are respected by the miners? No. And that's a big problem. If you go to Katanga, if you go to Kolwezi, we encounter that every single day. The people who don't want to follow by rules, they do whatever they want and they think they can buy everybody in Congo. And that's the problem.
Dozens of people die in mining accidents in the DRC every year. But locals continue to return to the mines to earn a living amid widespread unemployment.
According to the World Bank, artisanal mining provides a livelihood for around 10 million people in the DRC. But the vast majority of the miners are barely scraping by in a lucrative industry that has largely benefited multinational companies in the West. Now the DRC government is moving to formalize and safeguard the small-scale miners from the persistent disasters. Chris Ochemringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Tea is among the crops in Africa coming under strain from climate change. From erratic rainfall to prolonged droughts, producers are facing mounting pressures on yields and quality. However, scientists in Sri Lanka are returning to the past to find a way to safeguard its future, and it could have a telling impact in tea-producing regions of Africa. CGTN's Joy Kurukijuma has more.
Tea bushes have the ability to live for decades. But they are coming under increasing pressure from exposure to extreme weather patterns. Increasing heat and unpredictable rainfall are disrupting harvests and threatening supply. Zara Afshar, a senior official at Ahmad Tea in Sri Lanka, says growers are struggling with conditions that are no longer reliable.
So there's a multitude of issues when it comes to climate change and tea growing. Like most agricultural commodities, it really is seasonal and it depends on rainfall and heat. And what we are finding with our key tea suppliers is that predictability of rainfall and temperature is just changing so much. And now they're really having to invest in more climate resilient ways of farming.
Heavy rains, according to scientists, can erode soil, while intense sun can scorch leaves. Afshar says erratic weather is cutting into both quality and volume.
So quality is affected because the soil becomes eroded when there's really heavy rainfall, and obviously the heat from the sun can also damage the soil and also burn the top of the leaves. But the sort of overall threat to the yield is that when there are these climate sort of changes and erratic weather patterns, the tea growers aren't able to sell as much tea. A lot of the tea is actually damaged, and so the supply of tea becomes threatened, and sometimes we're finding that a key tea supplier is just not able to provide the volumes that they did the previous year.
In response, Ahmad Tea is backing scientific research to build resilience across the industry, working with Sri Lanka's Tea Research Institute and international partners. At the University of Bristol and the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, Sri Lankan scientist Damali Kariyawasam is examining tea leaves collected as far back as the 1800s.
The project that I'm working on investigates the impact of climate change on tea, Camellia sinensis. So particularly I'm interested about how the tea crop is being impacted by the drought or the prolonged dry period that the countries that the tea is growing experience with the climate change.
By analyzing preserved specimens alongside modern plants, she's building a 200-year time series studying changes in anatomy, chemistry and genetics.
By looking at this data, I could understand which plants are assimilating more carbon and losing less water. So which means they are more water use efficient. They could do more with less water. So if I identify such cultivars and also traits linked to such cultivars, I could recommend those cultivars to the plant breeders and also the farmers so that they could grow a better selection of cultivars in their estates and also use them for the scientific purposes for future breeding purposes.
Kew scientist Dr. Casper Chatter says the historic archive offers a unique climate record.
So if we can overlay the genetics of the crop on the historic climate change that crop has experienced, we'll be able to see how these teas are locally adapted to where they are and find the genes responsible for that local adaptation.
Researchers say the goal is practical, to help breeders develop hardier varieties and share guidance not only in Sri Lanka but also in major tea-producing regions such as India and East Africa, helping secure the future of a crop millions depend on. Joy Kurukijuma, CGTN.
Rama's in the studio, and that means it's time for our business segment. Over to you, Rama.
Thank you very much, Richard. Here's what's coming up in the world of money. Egypt is set to unlock another $2.3 billion in loans from the International Monetary Fund. And we'll explore a plan in Ghana to regulate artisanal gold mining. Let's start up north in Egypt. The country has gotten confirmation from the International Monetary Fund that it can access another $2.3 billion in loans. After several reviews, the international lender says Egypt will receive about $2 billion on an ongoing 46-month loan program and $273 million on top of that under a separate resilience and sustainability facility loan. Now, the RSF is designed to build the resilience of low and middle income countries against climate disasters and pandemics. That brings total disbursements under both programs to around $5.2 billion. Egypt, as you might recall, initially had agreed to a $3 billion loan with the IMF in late 2022, but that was later expanded to $8 billion in early 2024, at a time when the country was grappling with a combination of high inflation and foreign currency shortages. In recent months, Egypt has managed to largely get its economy back on track. The program is due to end in December. China's adopted plans to adopt a zero-tariff policy on imports coming in from the 53 African countries it has diplomatic ties with, starting from the 1st of May. It's a widely welcomed move in many countries around the continent, and a timely one, especially with enormous amounts of uncertainty over African trade with the world's largest economy. For more on its potential, here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim reporting from Cairo.
Mohammed Qasim is a veteran businessman in the textile industry and exports sector. He says China's new zero tariffs policy has come at an opportune time.
The Chinese market had grown tremendously and also at a time when the United States is closing the doors for other exports. Definitely that moves will encourage our association as Exporters Association to study the Chinese market, see what the items that we can concentrate on, and make plans to expand our exports.
China is Egypt's largest trade partner. However, out of about $18 billion in bilateral trade in 2025, Egypt exported less than $2 billion only to China. That's a significant trade deficit for Egypt. Chinese tariffs on Egyptian exports range from 5 to 50%. But the new zero tariffs policy will allow Egypt to significantly increase trade supplies to Beijing. Products that will benefit include textiles, chemicals, marble, granite, and agricultural products.
Increasing exports to China opens the door for business expansion, creates jobs and state revenue. China evidently supports Egypt's developmental goals, unlike the US, which uses tariffs as a political tool. It applies economic pressure on nations to change their political policies. In contrast, China wants to use tariffs to benefit itself and its partners as well. A win-win situation.
Additionally, China and Egypt have a comprehensive strategic partnership that has given a boost not just for bilateral trade, but investments as well. China is a major investor in Egypt, with about $8 billion in over 3,000 companies, mainly in the manufacturing, energy and construction sectors.
There is a lot we can take from the Chinese experience. China had a huge trade surplus because of their industrial policy and support for their exports. They design different program to support different industries. What the automotive industry gets is different than what the solar energy gets. So we need to look at these programs that China implemented in the past 20, 30 years and choose what fits with the Egyptian situation.
China's customs-free initiative will also go a long way in helping Egypt achieve its goals for total exports to reach $105 billion by 2030, up from just over $45 billion in 2025. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The continent's largest economy, South Africa, is another major economy that could benefit from China's zero tariffs policy. Experts say it could unlock new projects, support job creation and expand industrial partnerships. With the details, here's CGTN's Julie Shire.
As South Africa scrambles to diversify markets and accelerate export growth, China is emerging as a sure bet. A landmark framework agreement on economic partnership for shared development signed between the two countries, gives South African exports duty-free access to the vast Chinese market.
It is also an answer to unilateralism and protectionism. That shows South Africa and China hand in hand to open wider both their market to each other so that they can enhance our bilateral relations.
South Africa accounts for the largest share of nearly $300 billion in trade between China and the African continent. That figure is set to climb as the agreement opens greater access for key exports, including minerals, agricultural goods, and higher value processed products.
We've given them an initial list of 100 products, and those include manufactured products. But we've now said, now that we have this agreement, we can do a more comprehensive early harvest program that would enable manufactured goods to go into the Chinese market, and therefore you're able to add value to the quality of trade that we have with China.
Agricultural products, which have already gained a foothold in the Chinese market, are likely to feature prominently on the final list to be presented in March.
This agreement will open wider, of course, China's market to high-quality South African products like rooibos tea, wine, beef, citrus, and nuts. But also, it will benefit Chinese customers because they will buy these products with lower prices.
The deal goes beyond market access to China. Pretoria is positioning for a potential investment boost from its largest trade partner. South Africa is fast growing as an attractive market for Chinese automakers, gaining ground on traditional players.
There's a significant increase, in fact, of imports that we get from China, but there's also been appetite to invest in the country. More recently, Chery has made a deal with Nissan. We've also had commitment from BAIC, that was the initial company that invested in the country, to transition from semi-knockdown to complete knockdown, meaning actual manufacturing in the countries.
Beijing's zero-tariff move does not stop with South Africa. It extends to 53 African nations, broadening the scope of China's trade engagement across the continent.
It is also a time of great opportunity for our continent and indeed for our country as well. Global economic uncertainties, climate risks, and shifting trade patterns underscore the need for building economic resilience and capability. Diversifying both our export basket and our exporter base is in the end key to our economic growth strategy.
Africa and China have crossed the threshold into a new trade era. For many debt-burdened African nations still grappling with the threat of reciprocal tariffs from the United States, the agreement represents a huge win. Producers across the continent now have easier access to one of the world's largest consumer markets, with the potential to boost incomes, industrialization, and economic growth at home. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town.
On to West Africa now. Ghana says it plans to channel about 127 metric tons of gold a year from artisanal and small-scale mining into official trade channels. The country's finance minister says he hopes that this measure can enhance foreign exchange earnings but also stem losses attributable to smuggling. African countries are grappling with major gold revenue leakages from artisanal mining. Billions and billions of dollars in revenue every year are reportedly lost as undeclared gold is smuggled through porous borders into global hubs like Dubai. According to the non-profit foundation SOSAID, Ghana, the continent's largest single gold producer at the moment, forfeited about $11.4 billion in revenue from gold between 2019 and 2023. Minister Cassiel Attoforson, the country's finance minister, told Parliament that the Ghana Gold Board will be required to buy a minimum of 2.45 tons of gold from artisanal miners every week and to consolidate those purchases into a formal pipeline targeting more than $20 billion of annual inflows. In another major sector in Ghana, it's reported that licensed cocoa buyers owe banks as much as $750 million. And that's leaving the financial sector cash-starved for bean purchases. This comes at a time when lenders are straining to recover from the country's deepest economic crisis in decades. The president of the Licensed Cocoa Buyers Association of Ghana says these debts have accumulated and continue to do so because COCOBOT, that's the country's cocoa sector regulator, has been spending a lot more money on non-core activities rather than actually buying up available bean supply. Consequently, buyers have had to take out loans from banks in order to pre-finance their bean purchases. Ghana's cocoa sector has suffered 2 consecutive poor harvests due to crop disease and inclement weather. Globally, cocoa prices have also collapsed due to weak demand that has left an abundance of unused supply in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, which produce between them at least half of the world's cocoa supply. NVIDIA's latest quarterly results suggest that the artificial intelligence boom is, well, far from cooling off. The world's most valuable company by market capitalization posted earnings and revenue that once again surpassed Wall Street's expectations, fueled by explosive growth in its data center business. With shares climbing ahead of its release and another major tech conference on the horizon, questions remain on whether this momentum can ease growing concerns over a potential AI bubble. CGTN's Nick Harper has the details from New York.
NVIDIA's latest quarterly earnings suggests there's no slowdown in the artificial intelligence boom. This fourth quarter growth now means the world's largest company by market capitalization has grown even more. Earnings per share hit $1.62 versus an estimate of $1.54, while revenue also came in above expectations, about $2 billion higher, reaching just over $68 billion. A large part of their success came from the growth in its data center business. Revenue exceeded growth forecasts, posting a 75% increase. Ahead of the earnings release, during Wednesday's session, shares rose 1.4%, helping to push up the Nasdaq, with the index closing out the day 1.3% higher. There have been recent concerns about the impact of artificial intelligence, the proliferation of data centers popping up around the country, and fears of the AI bubble bursting. But Wednesday's investor confidence, alongside these bumper quarterly earnings, may help to ease those worries. NVIDIA is on a clear winning streak, spurred on by the AI boom. It is the only one of 8 trillion-dollar tech companies that has seen shares rise so far this year. And this is now the 11th straight quarter where growth has topped 55%. This latest set of company data also comes ahead of NVIDIA's annual GTC event next month. Last year's event helped push the stock price even higher. But have the earnings done enough to shore up investor confidence in AI and the wider tech sector? Probably yes, but we'll have to wait until Thursday's open on Wall Street to see just how much the company's earnings have helped. Nick Harper, CGTN, New York.
And at the open, of course, American indices were pretty much in the red, with the S&P 500 down 1% at one point. We'll have details of that at the top of the hour. Here's what else is coming up in global business. We'll explore the South African finance minister's budget speech. He focused on the need for much higher, longer economic growth in order to draw in a lot more foreign capital into the country. Details of that and lots more coming up at the top of the hour. For now, though, back to Richard for the sport.
Thank you so much, Rama. And we're not done just yet. We've got your sports segment coming up. Here are the headlines. Coming up in sports, South Africa reached the semifinals of the T20 Cricket World Cup.